after you coward!
Turn it up!
Delete! 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 Delete!
Hello and welcome to Broken But Glorious. I'm Chris Lapp and I'm delighted to be joined on the line by the owner of Chaos Wrestling, Dave Mercy. How you doing this evening, Dave?
I'm very good, thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thank you for joining us this evening. So, Dave has joined us to discuss the upcoming show, Coalition of Chaos, which is held on the 28th of October at the Hanham Community Centre in Bristol. So before we discuss the show, I just want to go through how you got into wrestling and a bit of history about the promotion. So, firstly, how long have you been a wrestling fan?
I started getting into wrestling back in junior school, so I'm going to show my age because I'm 35 now, so this would have been back towards the tail end of sort of Hogan and Warrior, I think. So I always remember my friends having those little wrestling buddies, the sort of little two-foot plush toy things.
Yeah.
But unfortunately I didn't have Sky at the time, so I'd normally get the sort of big pay-per-views on VHS from like the local video rental shop back when that was a thing. So I think the first pay-per-view I ever watched was probably WrestleMania 6, which was probably a couple of years old by the time I watched it.
Yeah.
And then, unfortunately, then it didn't become quite as cool, but then I got Sky and I started getting hooked on it. So it was around, 92, 93 when Brett became champion. That's where I really got hooked into it. So
late 92, he beat Flair, wasn't it? So.
Yeah, I mean, technically my first sort of live WrestleMania would have been WrestleMania 9, which I guess on reflection I probably shouldn't have stuck with it, considering that's probably one of the worst ones on reflection, but at the time I thought it was fantastic, and it dragged me in from the moment go. Like, it wasn't just about the wrestling, it was the whole storyline aspect of it, the characters, and yeah, like, when just that, seeing that first moment of seeing Brett, somebody knew who was a bit of an underdog, and then the fact that he became champion on a show nobody'd seen. I just remember watching Superstars one night when it was about 10 o'clock and I was up and watching it when I shouldn't have been very quiet, so my dad didn't find out. And then seeing Brett come out as champion, screaming, getting in trouble, get sent to bed. So that's probably my earliest sort of memories of me liking wrestling, and there was always like a small little elite group when it wasn't quite so cool, but we always used to stick with it, and yeah, it's become a passion and obsession ever since.
Yeah, the 93, 94 is my girlfriend's favourite period of wrestling, so we've watched that on the network so many times. WrestleMania 8 to 10, probably.
I've never heard anyone say that's their favourite. Wow, okay, that period's normally down as sort of the rebuilding period, so credit to her, that's impressive.
I wouldn't say it's her favourite, it's the bit she watched when she was little, and then she didn't watch it till our son got into it, probably up to 5 years ago. But yeah, WrestleMania, yeah, she loves WrestleMania 9. So I don't.
I like it for nostalgic reasons, but probably not for critical acclaim.
No.
Now looking back at it.
Right, so who was your favourite wrestler growing up?
I think I really liked Brett when I was first getting into it, but I'd say the wrestler that when I sort of reached my teenage years I related to the most was Mick Foley.
Yeah.
Because for me, he was that everyman. He was I always found it really difficult to relate to certain wrestlers in terms of I thought I could be them kind of thing. But when I looked at someone like Foley, who is probably himself isn't exactly the most athletic person in the world, but was still able to find a role in wrestling with his body type and the fact that he was able to capture your imagination through so many different ways in his performances, which I could connect to on a level which I couldn't do or couldn't feel like I could do with a lot of the other guys. No. Being a relatively plump man myself, I sort of related to him in terms of that. So yeah, I'd say Mick Foley's the guy that I probably related to the most, and the one that really sort of got me deep into wrestling.
So what prompted you to don the tights and get in the ring then, from being a fan?
It was a case where, you know, by the time you get to sort of 18, 19, and you're still part of that really small elite group of people that are friends that are watching wrestling, and it's always one of those things I wanted to do, and even say back then, which would have been the late 90s, it was really difficult to get involved with anything, but I actually found out through a friend of a friend that there was a school that was running actually in my town in Yate outside of Bristol, and it was basically just crash mats on the floor kind of scenario. Unfortunately the schools back then are nowhere near the level that they are now, but it was something that I was always a show off when I was in school anyway. I was always like any sort of talent shows or karaoke, anything like that. I loved doing that, and I think before I even started wrestling, I sort of learned that I loved to pop a crowd. So I always had that kind of more performance led than athletically led in terms of my sort of the way I approach wrestling, and I think that's to do with sort of my personality when I was growing up. I loved being in front of an audience, so as soon as I found out there was a school that was near me that was doing it, I was there the next week, and I stuck with it for a couple of years before I managed to get my first couple of matches in.
So was there a wrestler you wanted to mould your style around? Or?
It was basically Mick Foley, which, in reflections why I've stopped wrestling a couple of years ago, because my knees and back are shot. Because I was, and this is the advice I'll always give to people not to do, but I was always taking the silly bumps. So I'd always be taking apron bumps. I would try to do things exactly the way Mick would do it. You would take ridiculous bumps so people would remember you for that, rather than necessarily having the best technical match of the night, because I knew I wasn't as good as some of the better wrestlers on the card, but I knew that I was willing to do silly things like throw myself off ladders or taking silly headshots that a reflection were kind of wasn't my finest hour, but those are the kind of things that I was trying to do because I saw that's how Mick got over, and that's kind of the approach that I tried to take to it.
Do you cringe when you see headshots these days?
Oh God, absolutely. And I still do some work helping out with the Dragon Pro Wrestling Academy, and I'm always telling them, look, don't do as I say, not as I do. Especially now seeing that tight head drops or especially unprotected headshots. Now it's it was a different time in the late 90s, when sort of ECW and the WWE were both allowing those sort of things to happen, and rightfully they won't allow it now. My memory's nowhere near as good as it used to be. I'm not sure if it is because of that, or if it's because of getting older, but it's not worth those sort of risks. There's different ways you can entertain now without putting your brain at risk.
So where did the name Dave Mercy come from?
Complete lack of any sort of originality. It's come up before when I speak to people. It's not the most imaginative name. It's one of my trainers, Gideon, came up with it. To be perfectly frank, back then, and I think a lot of people do this when they first start wrestling, they don't think about characters. No. They just think about, I want to go out and wrestle. And the characters tend to form after that. So I just needed a name for my debut, and Gideon just said, what about, well, your first name's Dave anyway, what about Mercy? And I was like, I have nothing else, sure, why not, let's go with that. If I could go through that again, I wish I'd given my name more thought, because your name is very important, but by the time I sort of came to the realisation it was a bit naff, I was kind of stuck with it, so I kind of just ran with it for my career.
Could you tell us about some of the gimmicks you've worked as over the years? Or?
Yeah, sure. So I've worked as Crispin Buffley. So Crispin Buffley was an ironic fitness instructor that I did for 4FW. What's the best way to try to explain it? It was definitely comedy style wrestling. It was
Simon Dean type thing, was it?
Kind of Simon Dean, but imagine sort of Simon Dean with Dusty Rhodes' body. So that's kind of that's why I say sort of ironic fitness instructor.
So a bit like Bullfit from last year.
Bullfit, yeah. Imagine sort of Bullfit meets Simon Dean. That's kind of where I was with that. Another one I did. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear on the show.
You can do whatever you want. Yeah.
Okay, so I when I worked for Triple X, I had a character called the Sleazy Bastard, Dave Mercy, and that was basically I was basically the character was a sex pest, to be perfectly frank, but that was against sort of any of my opponents that I was in there with. So I'd stuff my crotch with about 10 pairs of socks. Yeah. I'd shave an arrow into my chest hair down to my crotch. I'd end up trying to do a striptease for the audience. So it basically sort of Joey Ryan on speed is probably the best way to think of it. So I did that towards the tail end of my career, and I think that's probably the time when I sort of realised that getting over in wrestling, if you're really athletically gifted and you're brilliant at wrestling, that's fine. I wasn't, but I was able to use those characters and able to actually probably get more reactions without doing the silly bumps if I really thought about what can generate a crowd reaction, using those characters than going out and risking my body towards the end.
So did you prefer to work face or heel?
I always prefer face.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is I think it's, I don't want to say it's easier, but I think it's easier to be hated than it is to be loved.
Yeah.
So I think it's not, you can do something very dastardly very quickly in a match, and to really establish that you're a heel, I think you have to put in a lot of effort, not just in that one match, but in your character, to try to get emotional responses from an audience that actually want to see you succeed. Especially in today's age, because I think trying to be a face nowadays is a lot harder than it used to be. I think I remember seeing something on a Secrets of the Ring DVD that Raven did ages ago, saying that you either want to be loved or hated, you don't want to be liked or disliked. And I think to be a really good face can be a lot harder than being a good heel. And that's a lot of that is understanding that you don't have to do loads of stuff when you're a face. At least I don't think you do. I think it's about getting a connection with the audience to make them want to see you succeed and make you want to see that comeback. But I'm not from a super, not don't want to say this in a derogatory way, but I'm not. I never considered myself to be an indie wrestler. That wasn't my style. I couldn't do an indie wrestling style. I was more based on I always try to drive more story for my matches, and I found doing that as a face, I could take a lot more time with what I was doing and try to get the crowd into it and tell a story through that way, rather than try to do move, because that's not my style. That's what I knew I couldn't do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense. And then you decided to start a promotion. How did that come about?
So the two guys that trained me, so Gideon and Jekyll, also known as Nick and Rob, who are my business partners, we were out on it was actually Rob's 30th birthday, and we just drunkenly agreed to it. But it was a long time coming before that, because they're guys that I would travel in cars with most weekends after shows, and most guys when they're in cars will dissect the show that they were just on and talk about what they thought worked, what they thought didn't work, what they would have done if they were in charge, how they thought things could have been different. And it kind of got to a point when we were in the same car having the same conversations for what felt like a decade. And it was kind of that case where if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So it's that if we don't at least try to put our money where our mouth is and actually try to do something and try to promote and put a product that we're saying that we would do, we're not really doing ourselves justice. And so that's basically how it came about. I think it was in January or late January, early February of 2013, and then our first show, Pro Wrestling Chaos, was in June 2013.
Wow, so that's quite quick turnaround.
Yeah, I think we were quite fortunate because we'd worked quite closely with a few promoters. So we worked for a lot of the promotion. So the main promotion we wrestled for was the Combat Sports Federation, CSF, based in Wiltshire, and we've done so much work with them, not just in terms of wrestling for them, but we helped promote the shows that were local to us as well. So we've done a bit of it. We haven't done the full end-to-end piece of being a promoter, but we'd seen bits and bobs, and we felt at the time that we knew enough to be a promoter. I mean, knowing what we know now, we probably didn't, but here we are. So, but the first show itself did quite well for what it was. We didn't know if we were going to have a promotion or if it was just going to be a one-off show, or if I wasn't expecting that 4.5 years later I'd be doing sort of podcasts and interviews talking about this silly company that we came up with on a drunken night out a few years ago.
As one of our forum members, Dr. Gregory House, has sent in a question. Yeah, he says, what makes your promotion different to other UK companies that have opened during the indie boom?
Okay, so I think the thing that we always try to do is we're all inclusive with our shows. So we often get tagged with the fact that we're family friendly. We don't feel that we are. It's almost we all cater to any age group. The only two things we don't do are swearing and blood. So we always say to any family that ever comes to us, can I bring a kid to the show? We say absolutely you can. If your kids watches Raw, they'll be fine with it. But the one thing that we try to do is cater to a more mature audience in terms of the storylines and the actual in-ring action that we're trying to put on. Even though I personally am not an indie guy, because I can't do that, we still have stuff that's going to be more suitable for a more mature adult audience. I think people have often referred to us before as sort of Progress you can take your kids to, or something along those lines. And it's not like we're trying to be Progress, because there's only one Progress and they're always the guys that get mentioned whenever you talk about British wrestling. But it's a case where we're not family friendly, we're just not family unfriendly. And in terms of what else makes us different, we're not trying to be a travelling company. We're very passionate about staying in Bristol. We don't want to try to spread out too far because we feel that there's more than enough wrestling promotions in the UK.
Yeah.
There's I think there's a stat like there's more wrestling companies per square meter, per square mile here than there are anywhere else in the world. And we know Bristol. We know it really well. We invite anybody that ever wants to come check us out to come find us. The travel links are really good here. But in terms of what makes us different, I'd say it's probably the fact that, you know, I'm a parent myself. I want to put on a product that I can sit down and watch with my kids. But at the same time, I'm an adult wrestling fan, and I want something that's not going to insult my intelligence. And that's the sort of the line we're trying to draw with what we do with Pro Wrestling Chaos.
He also asks if Luke Gallows is an unofficial director of your company, but that's only a reference you'll get if you're a TNA fan from 2012.
It's a bit niche for my liking, I'm afraid. I'm not sure.
In TNA in 2012, he was called the Director of Chaos.
The Aces and 8 thing.
Yeah.
Yes. It's brilliant. I can either confirm or deny if Luke Gallows is. He's not.
So, could you tell us a bit more about the first show and some of your memories of it?
Yeah, so, I mean, the first show, we were really lucky because we had a lot of favours we could call in for our first show because we had made a lot of friends in terms of what we'd done by being sharing locker rooms with a lot of people. So we had then still had a very good relationship with the Dragon Pro Wrestling Academy, who were based in Newport, now moved to Cardiff, run by Mike Hitchman now. Mike Bird, who was running the school at the time, sorted a ring out for us, sorted out music, sorted out an entranceway for us. He wrestled for us as well, and basically helped us more than anyone else. Helped put on that first show. We called it. I think pretty much everyone that we booked that first show, we either knew or knew of through friends of a friend. So we made sure that we put on, first of all, a cost-effective show because before anything else, this still needs to be a business. So we've got break-even points that we make sure that we needed to pass before we would put on a card. It was a 5-match card. I think the very first match we put on was a very different-looking kid Lycos, who may or may not be the same kid Lycos that there is now. He's grown ever so slightly. Versus Damien Dunne. That was the very first match that we had in Pro Wrestling Chaos. So it was Kid Lycos versus Damien Dunne.
Was he no fun back then?
He wasn't no fun, Damien Dunne, but he certainly wasn't embracing fun either. So I wrestled Mike Bird that night, probably one of my favourite matches I had. It was one of those very unique matches, because I was running around with a blue-ass fly, so I didn't really have enough time to even speak with him. And Mike is somebody that we knew was underrated for a very long time and dragged me through my nose throughout that match. Basically made me look a lot better than I was. I'm trying to remember the rest of the card, and I'm probably going to fail. But I can say that we nearly sold out that night. It was a really small venue. It was a community centre in Yate, near Bristol, where I live. It held about 180 people. We were about 15 shy of a sellout that night, which we were really happy with.
Yeah.
It's on our demand channel if anybody ever wants to check it out and really like single camera angled shows, because that's all we had at the time. But it's a show that's still very close to my heart, and even though if I watch it back now I'll probably cringe with the production values that we've got compared to what we've got now. But yeah, it was a very special night, and one that I'm certainly glad we did, because it made us kick on and carry on doing shows after.
So as a promoter, do you find it difficult to let go of control once the show starts?
Just
Control the show, basically, because once the show starts, your reputation is in the hands of the wrestlers.
If anything, that's my favourite part of the show. Because I know my job's done.
Yeah.
I know there's only so much I can control up until 7 o'clock when that first bell goes. I know that everyone that we booked and put on a card is infinitely better than I'll ever be, and will always be able to do a job better than me. So, as much of a control freak I am with certain aspects of it, I'm generally at ease with the guys when they go out and do their job, because most of the guys that we work with, we've either worked with before or come in based on good reputation. It's incredibly rare that we've ever had any sort of situation when we've not been happy with a performance or anything that's happened within a match. And generally speaking, if that ever were to happen, it's incredibly minor and something that I don't think anybody else would really notice. It's just because we sometimes know what it is that we expect from a match, and it doesn't sometimes go that way. But that's the nature of wrestling. I think because the three of us that run it have been wrestlers and are wrestlers for a number of years before we started the show, we recognise that life could go to plan. And sometimes you have to react to certain situations, and that's fine. That's the beauty of wrestling. As you probably know, anyone that's not involved in wrestling and just thinks everything's scripted, and I kind of prefer the fact that sometimes we have to do things slightly differently. And from my perspective, as being a promoter, that's fine by me. I will sit down and enjoy the show when I'm watching on the monitor backstage, and just try to pretend that remind myself that first and foremost I'm a fan of wrestling, and just let the story flow out in front of me. So yeah, I feel like I've rambled a bit with that question, but hopefully I've answered it.
So do your shows have a running story that goes from show to show, or do you try and contain the stories within the same show?
No, we are fully on board with doing story arcs in terms of we always try to come up with reasons for people to come back.
Yeah.
And I think the reason for that is that wrestling fans are, especially from someone like myself, you go through cycles where you got into wrestling normally when you're a kid and you don't appreciate what a 5-star match is. You get involved in wrestling when you're a kid because you really like the characters, or you really like the stories that you're being presented with. The more you watch it, the more critic you become, the more you're looking at the actual matches themselves. And then what you tend to find is when you start wrestling, you try to have those critical matches. We've tried to go back to the story bit.
Yeah.
In terms of we know what we're doing with certain characters at the minute, at the tail end of next year, because we know that we really enjoy stories in terms of wrestling. We know that that's what got us involved, and that's what we try to do to drag other people back into it. I mean, an example of that would be, it's going to be quite self-indulgent because I'm talking about myself, but when I finished up wrestling and I had my last match at Pro Wrestling Chaos, it was with a feud with Flash Morgan Webster, and we planned that out to last over 6 months, and we didn't have a single match across that time period. Wow. Apart from my last match. And by the time we got to that point, we built enough heat in that rivalry. So we did it was effectively like a loser leaves town match, which I obviously lost as Flash Morgan Webster still wrestling. Although not for us now, because he's recently lost a loser leaves chaos match as well. Now I say it, but we managed to build that story to such a fever pitch that there were grown men and women crying at the end of the night.
Wow.
Because the intricacies, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice by talking about it, but we made sure that there was enough heat on somebody like Flash Morgan Webster, so the audience wanted to see him lose, and the fact that he then managed to beat me and get my spot in the company helped make him. But then all the emotion that we got then after he left the ring and I was there, it's something you can't manufacture. It's something that you really have to work out and build out and be prepared to take time with the story for it to really come through. And that's not me saying that I've got any issue with any other company that say just do a supercard show or anything like that. There's a place for that as well. It's just that we choose to do things differently because we know now every day that we got for every show from now till the end of next year. So we've got that opportunity to be able to weave those stories in and out. So we know, we say at least half our roster what we're going to do with them. And we're approaching this as wrestling fans like, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this with this, which is different? We love stories, to be perfectly honest. The story is key. The wrestling, because we're getting guys that we know and trust that can have great matches no matter what you do with them. If we can build a story that makes those matches mean even more, that's the sweet spot for us.
Yeah, so we've had another question sent in. So Fernando asks if you could make a dream 3-match Chaos card with 1 women's match, 1 tag match and 1 main event, what would you choose?
Ooh, okay. We talking. What sort of limits have I got here?
He says that anyone is eligible, but you can just make it British independence if you want.
What do I do? What do I do? Okay. no matter what I say, I'm going to annoy people if I don't mention them.
Yeah.
So let's just get that out of the way now. Sorry to anyone I didn't mention. Okay, so I'd say, from a purely self-indulgent point of view, because the British wrestling match that got me involved in British wrestling, going back to 1999, was a match between Johnny Storm and Jody Fleisch, which I'm sure most people know about, or at least have seen, because it's a hell of a match. I'd probably put them as a tag team against Project Lucha, who have been with us for a very long time, and they've done a hell of a job for us. They are our current Knights of Chaos champions. So I'd probably put Project Lucha against Johnny and Jody as a tag match.
Yeah.
Women's match. Ooh. I don't know. So we've got cheap plug on Coalition of Chaos, who's our first ever women's tournament to crown our first ever Maiden of Chaos. Who would I want to see though? I'm going to come back to that. I'm trying to think. Right, main event. Let's go main event. You know what? It's a match that hasn't happened at Chaos and may not happen now because Webster's left. But we've never done Mike Bird versus Flash Morgan Webster.
Yeah. Oh, cool.
And they were sort of two of the staples that we've had within the company. Mike Bird was our first ever King of Chaos champion. Flash Morgan Webster held that title as well. They've been involved in multi-man matches, but there's a lot of history between them, not just in our company, but outside of it. And I know it would be a hell of a match, and not one that I think I've seen, especially one I've not seen in Chaos. And I'm bound to pick some of my guys for the main, so that's probably what I do for that. Women's match, right? Sierra Loxton.
Yeah.
Just because she's somebody that we have used a lot in terms of our women's division. So she's come through the Dragon Pro Wrestling Academy. Hell of a worker. Is going to be a big deal in the UK. I'm going to say her versus, only because I know she really wants the match to happen. It's going to be her versus someone like Viper.
Viper, yeah.
Yeah, which may happen, depending on how the brackets go, on the 20th of October. But even if it doesn't, that's certainly a match now that I'm thinking I'd like to book. So, one way or another, I might see if I could. That one's more realistic. I might be able to make that one happen. So, yeah, I've tried to keep it more British, tried to keep it in the realms of possibility, because realistically, I'm not going to be able to book Mick Foley. So, that's kind of what I'll do with that.
You can have him as guest commissioner for the night or something.
Oh, I'll tell you what I'll do with that tag match. I'll chuck the Young Bucks in. And the reason I'm going to chuck the Young Bucks, I'm going to make it a three-way tag. I'm going to cheat. Because we had the Young Bucks booked for a show last April, and unfortunately their New Japan dates moved, so they couldn't make the date. So I've always felt really bad that we haven't been able to make good on that promise. So Dreamcard, let's get the Bucks back. So we'll do Bucks versus Johnny and Jody versus Project Lucha. That's my tag match. I'm cheating. It's my card, I can cheat, so that's what I'm going to do.
Right, so we'll discuss Coalition of Chaos now. So it's such a big event that you've had to split the shows into two. You've got the 8-woman tournament, which features Viper and Aisha Raymond from the May Long Classic. Plus you have Pete Dunne and Keith Lee on the show. So what's going to be the card for the first show, which starts at 2 o'clock or 2:30?
Yes. So this is where I'm showing how professional I am. I don't have this written down in front of me, so let's commit it to memory and see if I can remember it all. So our Coalition of Chaos match, or the actual day show, is going to be the quarterfinals and semi-finals of the tournament, with the finals happening in the evening show.
Yeah.
So we have got, let's see, I might have this on my notes, so I'm going to pad for time at this point, so please hold the line, caller, because I know this is incredibly professional of me, but it's purely because I don't want to forget what we've got on here. Okay. Right, so the quarter-final matches are Ginny versus Viper.
Yeah.
Aisha Raymond versus Sierra Loxton. Session Moth Martina versus Jetta. And Dahlia Black versus Jamie Hayter.
Yeah.
And then we'll have whoever goes through for that will take part then in the semi-final matches during the day. And then in the main show, the main event for that match will be the final of the Maiden of Chaos.
So they got to get a title at the end of it, or
Yes, yeah. I've got the belt was delivered actually this week. We put a teaser poster out on a teaser picture on our social media of a Cryptic bag.
Yeah.
But behind it is a very nice new belt, which we're very proud of. It's a unique design, and we will be unveiling that on the 28th of October.
So a show 2 starts at 7. You've said you've got the final of the Maiden of Chaos, and then Pete Dunne and Keith Lee. Are they against each other, or are they going to be?
No, so we've got Pete Dunne is going against Dick Riley. So for anyone who doesn't know Dick Riley, he was a former member of the Magnums tag team with Chris Walker, who split up at the start of the year. Dick Riley, for me, currently is one of the unsung heroes of British wrestling. He has been having some outstanding matches for us at Pro Wrestling Chaos, and he is really somebody like I feel is at the stage where Mike Bird was when we started going back a few years ago, and Mike's now obviously more of a household name than he was a few years ago, and I really feel like someone like Dick Riley could be wrestling for the likes of ICW Ref Pro Progress within a couple of years, if not sooner. I genuinely think he's that good. He wrestled Mike Bailey, Speedball Mike Bailey, at our show last month and put on a match of the night performance, and he's taken on the United Kingdom champion, WWE United Kingdom champion Pete Dunne on the 28th, which potentially is going to be his biggest match to date, and a match I'm really looking forward to seeing.
I've only seen a couple of matches of Mike Bailey, but I love him. I've never heard of him before.
Yeah, he's absolutely fantastic. He's can't say enough nice things about Mike Bailey. It's first time we met him when he was at the show, but such a nice guy, and his kicks are they're something else. They really are. So anybody that wants to check out Mike Bailey versus Dick Riley, you can see it all on prowrestlingchaos.com/on-demand. There's a cheap plug.
It's $3.99 a month.
$3.99 a month, that's right. Some pounds, not dollars.
Right, so who's Keith Lee against?
We're not at liberty to say just yet. We have got a match planned. We should be due to announce that in a couple of days. So we're trying to keep our cards quite close to our chest in terms of some of the matches for the evening show. The only reason for that is we're really fortunate in the fact that the evening show is already sold out, which is a nice position for us to be in.
Yeah.
The one thing I can say about the evening show is that all the women that have been involved in the day show will still be involved in the evening. So we'll have the final, but we're also going to have a six-woman match. So everyone that was involved in the day will still be involved in that multi-person match in the evening. The other match we have already announced is our King of Chaos, Eddie Dennis, going against Eddie Ryan. As well. So the card is looking fairly stacked on, so we've still got Keith Lee's match to announce, and there's also some more, there's bound to be some other things I'm not going to go into right now, but trust me, Haddam Community Centre is a very special venue for us. It's not our largest venue, but it's one that probably creates the best atmosphere for us. So this is the first time we've tried to do a double show, and we are only about 30 tickets off selling out the day show, which has really exceeded our expectations. So we are really happy with how this has gone, and we really hope it's something we'll be able to do again in the future. So
will it be a six-woman tag or a six-pack challenge? Or
be a six-woman tag. Now, obviously, we can't announce who's in it because it depends what happens in the tournament during the day. But it's going to be any combination of the 8 women we've mentioned. So 6 of those will be in the tag match, and then the other 2 will be in the final, and one of those women will become our first ever Maiden of Chaos.
Well, so going forward, what are the goals for Chaos? So in the short term, you've got a show in November with Mark Skirl and Matt Riddle.
Yeah. To be honest, it's we've been trying very, very, very hard to get into a special venue in Bristol called the Colston Hall. Yeah. So for anyone not familiar, Colston Hall used to be part of the Water Sports Circuit. It was run by All Star Wrestling for years. After a refurb, they decided they didn't want to have wrestling as part of their program going back a few years ago, and it is due to actually get completely redone and renamed next year. And we've been pushing very hard for us to try to get into that venue. We realise it'll be a risk because the place holds about 2,000 people, but it's a venue which is really close to my heart. It's somewhere where I used to watch a lot of wrestling when I was growing up, and I've got a lot of memories of that venue. And anyone that watched wrestling in the sort of 80s and early 90s will generally say the same sort of things about it. Unfortunately, they're just not interested in having wrestling as part of their program. We hope they change their mind because it's something that we really want to be part of. In terms of our other goals, generally speaking, we're quite happy with what we're doing at the minute in terms of we're building good stories with what we're doing. We're happy with the venues that we've got. We've got a good working relationship with the other promotions around the Bristol area, and we're not looking to try to step on anyone's toes. We're just trying to focus on what it is that we're doing. We always said that, I mentioned earlier, we don't want to travel outside of Bristol. We want to be what I've always said is like a magnet promotion. If you want to see us, we're not hard to find. Bristol's not that difficult to get to from the M4, the M5. So we're hoping that we're putting on cards where we're building stories which will make people want to come and see us. So yeah, that's always been our mantra, and it's every year has been getting bigger and bigger in terms of our houses, in terms of the speed of the tickets being sold. As long as we continue with that momentum, we're happy with that at the minute. If we could get into the Colston Hall, that would be the icing on the cake of what's been a very good couple of years for us.
Yeah, I had to do a double check on the poster because I was looking at the website and thought, that Ollie Davis from Wrestle Talk, and then I had to look closer inspect and it was Eddie Dennis. I was like, what?
Yes, no, it is the pride of Wales, Eddie Dennis, current King of Chaos champion.
Right, so in January you've got a show which's got the Rick and Morty poster.
Yes.
And it says you got your first ever interdimensional mystery portal match.
Yeah.
What's that?
I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We're working on getting a portal gun, and we will see what happens. I mean, we've actually we've got a show that we run every year called Total Chaos, which is where we don't announce anything. That match may have similar lines to that, so don't expect anything to be announced about that match. To be perfectly honest, Jim at Turning Face, who also runs Right Duck graphics, so Jim Maltman, who's our photographer, but also does all of our graphics. I just mentioned in passing, if you watch Rick and Morty, if you'd be able to do a poster, and within a couple of days he managed to produce that, and it's my favourite wrestling poster I think I've ever seen.
It's really, really good.
The three of us are massive massive wrestling fans, but massive Rick and Morty fans. We appreciate it. It's a fairly niche taste to find somebody that likes both.
Yeah.
But for those that do, the feedback we've had on the poster has been very positive. So it's in a new venue for us at the King's Oak Academy in the Hexagon Theatre, which holds around 300 people. It's a lovely little venue. It's something that we're really looking forward to, and based on the poster alone and some of the ideas we're talking about, trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun with that show.
Right, so, I listened to an interview you did about 2 years ago, and you mentioned that for British wrestling to grow, you'd either have the companies would either have to start working together, or one company would have to take a risk. So, in the last 2 years, have you seen companies being more willing to work together?
I think there's certain companies. I think what's the best way to put this? I think it's more companies aren't necessarily. You're not seeing co-branded shows anywhere.
No.
But I certainly think there's more understanding between promotions now than there was a couple of years ago. Obviously, the obvious one is that the WWE's got partnerships with a couple of them. So, naturally, that alone, compared to where we were a couple of years ago, is a huge step forward. And obviously, those companies will have to work together in some respects because they're working with a huge business partner, which happens to be the biggest wrestling company in the UK. Oh, sorry, in the world. Sorry, not in the UK. In terms of what we do, we have a working relationship with the likes of Dragon Pro Wrestling, as I mentioned earlier, and Attack Pro Wrestling. And it's not that we co-brand shows or do anything on those lines, but we help each other out. If there's things that we can do helping some of the guys' production out of the shows, we're more than happy to do that for them. If there's business-related questions that we've had on either side, whether that be, for example, how do you sort a visa for an international talent, or especially now when say for example Attack are running a show the day after us in Bristol, which is also sold out. So it's actually worked out really well for us because a lot of the guys, we use several of the guys who are on part of the same show, so we can arrange, rather than having to travel back and forth twice, we can talk with them, sort out accommodation, so it actually saves us both money.
Yeah.
I think it's things like that where you'll find that we're working closer together, and there's a lot of promoters will talk with each other, which we don't necessarily see on a public level. But I'll be chatting to promoters on a daily basis about a range of different things, and that's all based on the strength of keeping your business relationships tight and sticking to your promises and having good reputations. And there's a lot of very good companies out there that do all that have very good reputations, and are willing to work with each other, whether that be flight splits on international talent, whether that be sharing of advice, stupid things like I'm part of private groups when somebody doesn't know where to source tables from, for example, and somebody else will pipe up with you can get the best deal here, or where to get the best public liability insurance. Everyone's trying to help each other now to try to run their businesses, their own businesses better, but we're helping each other as a community, I feel, now, so we can all run better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So,
And one company that is actually taking the risk is Progess have announced the Wembley show next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a risk, but I think for Progess, it's actually really funny. I was speaking to John ages ago. I think I bumped into John. It was actually the only time I met him face to face. I spoke to him loads online, but the only time I met him face to face was just after NXT ran at Wembley. Yeah. And we were both walking on the tube, and I had like 2 minutes with him. And I messaged him the next day and said, how long before you ran there, winky face? And that was going back, 2.5 years ago. Yeah. And, he completely dismissed the whole thing. And then the day after that was announced, I just sent him a screenshot of that conversation and just remembered that, if any company's able to do it, as far as calculated risk goes, it's going to be Progess. They are, for my money, the biggest indie company in the world. Yeah. In terms of, if you think about their reach, the markets, the fact that they are an international company now. And if they're able to sell out somewhere like the Ali Pali in advance, doing Wembley, I don't think it's as unachievable as it would have seemed a couple of years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't at least sell it out, they get an incredibly respectable number there. And they've earned that right because they built themselves a very strong brand, which people are willing to travel, not just from the UK, but all around the world to go see. And I wish them all the luck in the world because they've taken their time out to help me out when they didn't have to, and that's part of the community that I'm talking about with British wrestling. So it's a risk, but it's certainly a calculated risk and one that I think is going to pay off for them.
What did you think of the 5-Star Wrestling getting the free sport deal over Preston City Wrestling?
Oh, okay. So I've got a relationship with PCW with Stephen Flood. I speak to him a fair bit. It's obviously something's happened with regards to that deal. Do I think it's the best thing for British wrestling? Possibly not, because based on the kind of cards that I've seen that 5-Star put on, it's not necessarily British wrestling. But again, at the same time, I don't know if they've ever tried to make out that they're trying to do what's best for British wrestling. They're trying to do what's best for 5-Star to create a company which I assume they hope they can make money for themselves. Obviously, based on the social media backlash that I've seen from that decision, whether, depending on what the audience is going to be, that may be a calculated risk for free sports. And I'm trying to be as politically correct as I can be when answering this question, because I'm trying not to annoy anyone. But from my perspective, I feel that it would have been nicer, I feel, to see a company like Preston City Wrestling, PCW, get that, because they do use a lot of British talent. And they have built a lot of British talent over the years. I appreciate that they're not everybody's cup of tea, but they've always done right by me. And their production values in terms of producing shows, they were TV ready. And I know that they've now got a deal with Power Bombs. They're still able to put out live pay-per-views in terms of what they're able to do. And knowing somebody like Stephen Fludder, it's going to be a minor annoyance for him, but he's a very smart businessman, and there'll be other opportunities for somebody like him to get on television. So, best of luck to 5-Star. It's certainly an ambitious plan they're putting together, one that may pay off, may not. But the old adage of time will tell, and I will be watching as a fan, like everybody else, to see what happens with that deal going forward.
Is it a testament to British wrestling that you don't have to import ex-WWE TNA wrestlers, put them on your posters to get people to come to? You can actually put a Pete Dunne or a British-made guy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is a massive testament to British wrestling. I'll hold my hands up and say 10 years ago, I think you could count on one hand the number of British wrestling draws in terms of people you could go out and say, if you put a British wrestler on a card, that person will, just by name value, will generate more people. Yeah. And that's not to say that the quality of the wrestling wasn't there, it's just that there wasn't that perception of that person's must-see. That number has grown to 50, 60, 70 people now, in terms of the churn that you can do in terms of getting individuals. There's loads of people that we haven't used ourselves yet that we know from a British wrestling standpoint. If we put them on a card, it's going to help our draw now. That was madness 10 years ago. Like 10, 15 years ago when I was getting into the business, the only thing that was the draw was the word wrestling on the poster. And then occasionally if you happen to have an ex-WWE guy. The one thing that we found recently is because for our bigger leisure centre shows, in the past, we've used ex-WWE guys to help us with the draw.
Yeah.
Now, when we had Paul London on our last show, the last big leisure centre show we did, nothing at all against Paul London. He's a lovely, lovely guy, and I love the guy. But the more people were talking about the other matches than they were about the stuff that Paul did, and that's not saying that Paul phoned it in or anything on those lines, but it's because British wrestling's now starting to get that much of a buzz that British wrestling itself is the draw, and the individuals you can put with it help add more spice to it. Obviously, I know I'm being a bit hypocritical because we talked about how I got Keith Lee on the show this month, on the 28th. But obviously, realistically, from a business standpoint, the likes of Keith Lee are nowhere near as expensive as the likes of your ex-WWE guys, and Keith Lee is a phenomenal talent in his own right and somebody who's on the rise. And I'm going to start jabbing now to try to talk myself out of this cul-de-sac debate. But really what I should be saying is, and what I do believe, is that British wrestling in its own right now is the hottest I've ever known it. And long may it continue. There are a lot of very good guys out there that are finally starting to make a full-time living out of this. And I couldn't be happier for them. There's a lot of guys making a lot of money, a lot more money than I'm making, and I'm thrilled for them. Because I've seen guys that I've known for years toiling away, just working hard, and now it's paying dividends, and I couldn't be happier for them.
It's the first show I went to, the whole thing was based around Come See Gangrel.
Yeah.
And he was in a tag, I think it was in a 6-man tag, and he barely got in the ring. It was Gangrel, Nathan Cruz, and Zach Gibson versus Dino, Mark, James Mason, and somebody else, can't remember the other. But he barely got in the ring. So
honestly, the rest of that card sounds great. The rest of that match sounded great, though.
Yeah. But the whole poster was built around Come See Gangrel. It's
I think that happens a lot. I mean, ICW are the first ones that started to do the whole thing where they bring in an import, but they bring them in more as an advert for their product.
Yeah.
And they would. So most of the times when we use an import, we're using it to enhance our talent. And I'm not to say that talent enhancement is obviously not necessarily the best turn of phrase, but what I'm saying is normally when we brought in somebody internationally, we're doing it to try to help build our guys. We're not putting them in throwaway tag matches. If you think about something like Wild Boar, when he was our champion, we brought in Hardcore Holly and he beat Hardcore Holly.
Yeah.
A great example, I know it's not the same level, but when we brought in Chris Hero, had one of the best matches we've ever seen at Chaos against Eddie Dennis. So much so that the crowd, without him even saying it, he booked his own return because the crowd were basically saying one more match before the match, before he even left the ring. And going back to what I'm saying about stories, it's giving you a reason to come back. I knew that night, even though we hadn't booked anything else, if we ever book Chris Hero again, just based on that one night and that story of the fact that can Eddie beat him again? How will Chris Hero get his revenge on that match? That itself, in that little bubble, was enough to then do that match over, but sell another 100 tickets.
Yeah, brilliant.
Because of the strength of what we're able to do with it.
So we go quickly back to the TV. Do you feel that a TV deal is needed these days to get British wrestling to carry on growing, or do you think the other avenues, like your online demand, etc.?
Yeah, I don't think television is as important as it was in the 90s or in the early 2000s because there's so many other ways that people consume media now. I'm sure there's lots of companies out there that if they wanted a TV deal, if they really wanted a TV deal, could probably get one. I mean, look, ICW, ironically, they've got 30 countries that they currently run TV for internationally. So they do it, it's just that they choose not to in the UK because they've already got their on-demand. People are able to generate revenue through so many other streams now that on-demand has become more of an easily accessible thing for people to do in the way that people choose to absorb their content. There are a couple of companies I've seen that have got TV, wrestling on some of the more obscure Sky channels on there.
We have new Next Gen on the Liverpool channel.
So there's NGW. I think they're kind of an exception because they've got they've managed to get a deal with all of those. So we've got them down here and made in Bristol as well. So I can't remember the name of the group, but they're basically in every household group everywhere. So it's almost like a national free TV deal that they've got. And the way that NGW works, because they've now got the Butlins deals now as well, haven't they? So they're fairly busy boys. I think that TV deal's probably one of the better ones. There are some. If you really go through them at sort of 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, there are some other ones out there that I'm not sure how much that helps a product.
Yeah.
If you look at Progess at the minute, they've got a very, very strong on-demand subscription channel. They're selling out every single show that they do, depending on what kind of deal it is that they're going to get for their TV. If it's going to be more than what they're going to lose by potentially people no longer doing the on-demand because they watch it on television or don't come to shows, is it worth the gamble when you've got a guaranteed income stream through other areas? I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the ins and outs of their business model, but I'm seeing a lot of bigger companies right now that aren't necessarily having TV products and are thriving.
Yeah.
So I don't think having TV is as important as it would have been. And I'm sure if any company really want TV, they could get it, and they're choosing not to for a reason. I know that we're not TV ready. I know we don't do enough of a product out there. We don't run enough shows for us to be able to put on a regular TV show. And it's not something that I personally consider to go down. There's other companies that are geared up to do it, but they're choosing not to for whatever reason.
Right, so, one last question. There's still talk of a WWE-based TV show. What's the feeling about UK promoters with WWE basically invading British wrestling type of thing?
I think I saw a tweet from Joe Coffey.
Yeah.
Going back to the first Hydro show they had last year, because there was some controversy around WWE using the Hydro the week before the ICW did, and I think it was something like if McDonald's wants to move next door to your sandwich shop, McDonald's are going to move next door to your sandwich shop, or something to that effect. WWE are the biggest show in town. They're going to do whatever they want to do, and that's their prerogative. For me, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because WWE, for a lot of people, is a way that a lot of people get into wrestling. It's the most easily accessible product out there. It's the way that you cultivate and generate wrestling fans from a young age. It's probably not the best example, but if you think about it, I had somebody years ago make out that say, take a band like Busted, who are designed for kids, but they can get those kids involved into potentially guitar music, which then means that they might like a different range of music at an earlier age because they start to look into other avenues and other things around that music genre. WWE aren't the be-all and end-all of wrestling, but they are the biggest show in town, and they are a way that they can generate the most amount of fans. Now, if that means they start putting on UK wrestling, they start putting on shows across the UK, they're not going to be able to, unless they decide to do it in one place every single time. I would assume or hope that they would try to take that everywhere, and potentially they could do a show in Bristol, for example, and that might hurt us 1 month if we did a show the same month, because people would choose to go to the WWE show than us. But that tells me that there's potentially thousands of people that we're not marketing to. So that tells me that there's an audience around there that I know that we can still tap into. So I'd see that as an opportunity rather than a negative.
Oh, I see.
So I think people shouldn't be afraid of them. I mean, obviously, they're going to do what they want to do. And I think from any sort of business, you either, if you don't treat it as an opportunity and look at it how you can get something from that, then you're just being negative. Someone always tells, don't focus on what other people are doing, focus on you. The more time you focus on anything anyone else is doing, is time wasted on what you could be doing to build your own brand and your own product. So if WWE come into town, more power to them. That means I know that there's a lot more fans I can get to.
Right, so before we go, do you want to promote your social media and your website?
Yeah, thank you very much. So you will be able to find our Facebook page is Pro Wrestling Chaos. Our Instagram page is Pro Wrestling Chaos. Our Twitter is @chaos_wrestling, because somebody already got Pro Wrestling Chaos on that. You can see every single one of our shows from June 2013 to now on our on-demand channel, which you can find on our website, prowrestlingchaos.com/on-demand. You can get that for $3.99 a month. It works on any device. It also works on PlayStations, which I know is a advantage over something like Pivot Share. So we don't use Pivot Share. It's all produced by Your Fight site.
Yeah.
Also, for that $3.99, you don't just get our shows. You will also get all of SWA Shropshire Wrestling Alliance's shows, Ultimate Pro Wrestling shows. There's also Triple X's back catalogue, and we've just started to add Wrestle Midland shows. So there's well over 100 hours of content on there. Plus, we've got not just our shows, we've also got interviews with ex-WWE guys. So guys like Bob Hollies, we've got a shoot interview with. There's one with Chris Hero on there. We've done one with Paul London. We've got one with Tommy Dreamer there. Plus, there's some special documentaries and stuff. So it's not, if you want to see some more behind-the-scenes stuff, we've added that as well. I think that's probably about as much hard selling as I'm going to do on the on-demand. So yeah, check it out, $3.99 a month.
All the links will be in the description below this interview. So.
Fantastic, yeah. Look at the links on your phone. Do that.
I've really enjoyed speaking today. Good luck with the Coalition of Chaos show. Sounds amazing. Wish I could live nearer to Bristol.
Well, that's right. I'm sure you better check it out on demand. I may have mentioned it.
Yeah. $3.99 a month.
Yeah, $3.99 exactly.
Alright, so thanks for joining me. I'd love to have you on again in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.